So good morning guys. For today's video, we are going to tackle all about approaches to language teaching, cognitive code theory and applied linguistics. So first, let's have learning outcomes. First, able to identify different theoretical background about cognitive code theory. Second, define the cognitive code learning. Third, able to know the significance, strength, and weaknesses, methods, and principles of cognitive code learning. And the last one is know the purposes of cognitive code learning. So, we have our first question. What do you know about cognitive code learning? Let's have our discussion. What is cognitive code learning? It is also known as CCLT. Cognitive acts as an adjective. It involves conscious mental activities, for example, thinking, understanding, learning, and remembering. Code acts as a verb and a noun. As a noun, it is a set of letters, symbols, and etc. to send message, as well as it consists of a set of rules or ideas about how to behave. Next one. It refers to a theory of second language teaching and learning. It is accepted as a merger of Chomsky, transformational grammar, and Carroll psychology. Carroll, 1965. So, cognitive code learning refers to a theory of second language teaching and learning rooted to cognitivist psychology and a structural applied linguistics developed in the 1960s. The theory emphasizes the central role of cognition in the conscious and explicit learning of the rules of a language as code. Next one is transformational generative grammar. Language is rule-governed and creative. Language includes deep and surface structures. Competence and performance are important aspects. Cognitive code equals rules plus creative plus competence plus mental plus social factors. So, transformational generative grammar is a system of language analysis that recognizes the relationship among various elements of a sentence and among the possible sentences of a language. And it uses processes and rules to express this kind of relationship. So, for example, transformational grammar relates the active sentence, John read the book, with its corresponding passive, the book was read by John. The statement, George saw Mary, is related to the corresponding questions, whom or who did George see, and who saw Mary. Although sets such as these active and passive sentences appear to be very different on the surface, a transformational grammar tries to show that in the underlying structure, the sentences are very similar. Next, Gestalt psychology or Carroll psychology. Learning should be holistic. Learning should be a combination of mental and social factors. Learning a language is a process of acquiring conscious control of the phonological, grammatical, and lexical patterns of the second language, largely through study and analysis of these patterns as a body of knowledge. Carroll, 1966. Gestalt psychology, school of psychology founded in the 20th century, that provided the foundation for the modern study of perception. Gestalt theory emphasizes that the whole of anything is greater than its parts. That is, the attributes of the whole are not deducible from analysis of the parts in isolation. The word Gestalt is used in the German modern world to mean the way a thing has been placed or put together. There is no exact equivalent in English. Form and shape are the usual translations. In psychology, the word is often interpreted as pattern or configuration. Let's have theoretical background. Cognitive psychologists and applied linguists such as John D. Carroll and Kenneth Chastain advocated the cognitive code approach in 1960s to the study of the second language as an audiolingual method prevalent at the time. To a great extent, cognitive code learning theory was based on contemporary developments in transformational grammar and the generative theory of language that developed in the 1950s and 1960s. CCLT is a theory of language 1 and language 2 studies and research. At this time, Chomsky's theory of transformational generative grammar strongly emphasized rule-governed nature of language and language acquisition. Rather than habit formation, this trend gave rise to CCLT, in which language learners are encouraged to work out grammar rules deductively for themselves. Cognitive code learning theory has the influences of cognitive psychology. It is also based on Gestalt theory, which states learning should be holistic. The cognitive approach is sometimes considered the modern version of the grammar translation method. Cognitive learning theory explains how internal and external factors influence an individual's mental processes to supplement learning. Delays and difficulties in learning are seen when cognitive processes are not working regularly. These processes are such as attention, observation, retrieval from long-term memory, and categorization. Several researchers have made significant contributions to this theory. Jerome Bruner focused on how mental processes are linked to teaching. Another researcher by the name Jean Piaget recognized that the environment plays a huge role and also focused on changes that take place in the internal cognitive structure. Today, cognitive learning theory is dominant in psychology. It is broken down into two categories. Next one, purposes of cognitive code learning. CCLT is aimed to foster competence. CCLT emphasizes the central role of cognition in the conscious learning of rules of language as a code. The main emphasis is in the meaningful practice. Cognitivism focuses on the mind and more specifically mental processes such as thinking, knowing, memory, and problem solving, with the goal of opening the black box of the human mind, the process of which is deemed valuable and necessary for learning to occur. The cognitive learning approach teaches students the skill they need to be learned effectively. This helps students build transferable problem solving and study skills that they can apply in any subject. Developing cognitive skills allows students to build upon previous knowledge and ideas. Principles of cognitive code learning theory. Learning occurs through cognitive memory structures which perceive, process, store for short or long-term recall and retrieve information located in the brain. Learning occurs through internal processing of information. The central first step of cognitive code theory is meaningful practice in a second language. Language is taken as complex and rule-governed activity. Learning should be holistic. Thinking, comprehension, and memory must be emphasized. Classrooms activities are designed to encourage learners to work out grammar rules for themselves through inductive reasoning. Content over form must be emphasized. Lessons must be highly structured around a deductive process, often giving the rule of the day. Cognitive control work as follows. Phonemes are to be learned before words, words before phrases, clauses before sentences, and simple sentences before compound, complex and compound complex sentences. The learner is an active processor of information processing. He or she is a thinking being. So matter to be learned is meaningful to the learning. 3 specific cognitive learning principles that are effective in the classroom include encouraging classroom discipline, using the personal contract, and creating token economies, systems of trade that allow the students to earn privileges or objects that they want. Makikita po natin na ang pagkatuto ay ating ginagamit sa pagpaprocess ng mga information na natututunan natin sa pag-aaral sa school or kahit ngayon pong online class. When linguists say that language is rule-governed behavior, they mean it has a grammar or a set of conventions that organizes its proper use. These rules set boundaries around meaning of words and dictate how words are related to each other. In different languages, rules vary in importance. For example, in English, word order is of supreme importance in determining meaning. In Latin, however, word endings are more important. It is said that learning is holistic. Learning should deal on the whole of something or someone, but not just a part. In cognitive code learning theory, we should be able to express thinking and comprehension skills in order for us to understand a certain topic. Next is strengths of the cognitive code learning theory. CCLT has some advantages. It revived the re-emergence of grammar in the classroom. It put more emphasis on guided discovery of the rules. This is the rule-governed nature of language. It rejected the habit formation of behaviorist theory. There is language acquisition rather than habit formation. It is stressed in the learning of the rules via meaningful practice and creativity. It practically focuses on the individual student and his/her learning process and progress. It motivates the students to draw from their experience and utilize their mental grammar. The students are old enough to understand and apply the process of transfer from language 1 to language 2 in their language learning. It guides students to discover rules for themselves and use what is called the guided inductive approach to teaching. Teachers provide the necessary tools to their students so they can work on their own in their assignments. English teachers can be more didactic and creative with their students, and the children can enjoy learning through no rigorous processes. Errors are considered an important part in the learning process notion of competence and performance. Next, we have weaknesses of cognitive code learning theory. CCLT is essentially a theoretical proposal because it did not lead to the development of any teaching method in relation to classroom procedures and activities. As a theory, it often ignores past experiences and culture influence while you process information. It is a depersonalized theory. In other words, it does not take into consideration feelings or unconscious actions or reactions. Another important criticism is that biology, genetics, culture, and past experience have not been sufficiently tested as factors in mental processing. It is extremely time intensive on the part of the foreign language teacher or educator who acts as a facilitator, has to invest a huge amount of effort on a per student basis. The main disadvantage of the cognitive approach is that it refers to cognitive processes that we cannot directly observe. It relies heavily on inference. Another weakness of the cognitive approach is that it ignores other factors towards behavior that have been shown to affect behavior. Conclusion. So to sum it up, CCT or cognitive code theory is largely seen as an updated variety of the traditional grammar translation method, with an attendant goal of overcoming the shortfalls of the audiolingual approach. The cognitive code view of learning suggests that information is gathered and processed by our brain, and information processing is a cognitive view of learning.